we'll
Oh,
get,
we got
we'll get to
minutes.
That's why I told him.
It's a Potomac River thing. When you go, every time a commission meeting there, they have like 5 people.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the September 24th, 2024 meeting of the Marine Resources Commission. I'd like to call it to order. And would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Associate Member Branson, followed by invocation by Associate Member Preston.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's bow. Father God, we come before you as that one nation under you, God. We are thankful for the resources that you have given to us and directed us to be responsible for, God. We just ask for you to shine here, and God, we're thankful for the opportunity to be able to serve. God, we thank you and we praise you, but most importantly, we're thankful for the gift of salvation. It's in Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone today. Before we get started, I would like the record to reflect, Ms. Hogg, that Associate Members Hand, Kellum, and White are not present today. All right, well, that being said, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections, deletions, or changes from, come forward, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. I would like, propose that we move item 8, which is a request for public hearing regarding blue crabs, move that to number 7 and do the public hearing for snagging 8th. And the reason for that is Chairman of the the Crab Management Advisory Committee, Ed Tankard, who's here. If the board wants to hear from what went on at CMAC during the proceedings, but he has a 12 o'clock appointment in Norfolk, so the sooner we can get him out of here, the better. He made the effort of coming up here from Eastern Shore, so I'd appreciate if we can do that.
Absolutely. Matters before the commission for moving item number 7 to 8 and item number 8 to number 7.
Motion to approve with changes.
Got a motion to approve, Mr. Headley. Got a second from Mr. Branson. Any further discussion? All right. That being said, all those opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Pat. Is there anyone else that has any deletions or changes, commission members or staff, to the agenda? All right, we're good to go. On to the minutes. Are there any corrections, deletions, or changes from the commission members or staff for the August 27th, 2024 commission meeting minutes? Any changes?
Motion to approve.
Got a motion to approve from Mr. Erskine. Got a second from Mr. Branson. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, we'll swear in VMRC staff and VIM staff that will be speaking or presenting testimony today during the meeting. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. All right. On to, I think you're up, Randy.
Mr. Members of the Commission, good morning. As you'll note, we have uncharacteristically no page 2 cases today, nor any page 3 cases. So we have one protested boathouse case that I will present. I can hit the right button here. Okay. So Mr. Roger Evans Jr. is requesting authorization to construct a 30-foot long by 14-foot wide open-sided single-foot boathouse over an existing boat lift adjacent to his property, his wife's property along Cod Creek at 485 Clark Lane in Northumberland County. The project is protested by the adjacent property owner. The project is located in the Heathsville area of Northumberland County on Cod Creek. You can see just to the west is the Cowart Seafood Corporation location, so you can see where you are. There are a number of boathouses in this region of the Commonwealth and certainly on Cod Creek. In fact, there's one, when this photograph was taken, there was one under construction right across the road from Mr. Evans. That boathouse is most likely built now, and it was authorized by statute. Mr. Evans and his wife are seeking to simply add a roof over their existing lift. Their pier and lift are statutorily authorized. Here's your plan and cross-sectional drawings showing the 14 by 30-foot, roof. They'll add a 4-foot wide catwalk, which will be authorized by statute as a pier. You're here today to review the roof because it is protested by Mrs. Router, who lives on the point. She is arguing that the roof will obstruct her view and that of her neighbors on the creek. Moving into the summary. Section 28.2, 1203A5 of the Code of Virginia provides statutory authorization for the construction of an open-sided boathouse measuring 700 square foot or less, which is designed to cover a single vessel, provided the adjacent property owner voices no objection. In this case, while the boathouse is designed to qualify for the statutory authorization, an adjacent property has raised an objection, and therefore it requires a permit from you guys, the commission itself. Mr. Evans' 420 square foot open-sided boathouse design is well below the 700 square foot threshold for a boathouse structure set by the General Assembly. As such, we find that the proposed boathouse is a reasonable use of state-owned submerged land and recommends approval contingent upon approval by the Northumberland County Board of Supervisors. We did not keep it off the agenda. It still needs to go before the county, but we had a light agenda. We wanted to have something on for you, and we have no problem, we think, recommending approval of this in advance of the county's approval. That's all I have, sir.
Is there any questions from the commission? Chief, here. Chief, thank you, Grant. Is the applicant or a representative of the applicant here wish to speak?
Mr. Evans? I don't wish to speak.
Okay, no worries. Is there anyone here in opposition that wishes to speak to this project? Anyone here in opposition? All right. That being said, matters before the commission.
I'll move to approve staff recommendation.
Got a motion to approve staff recommendations from Mr. Branson.
I'll second it.
Got a second from Mr. Headley. Any discussion? Any discussion? Is there anyone opposed to this motion to approve staff recommendation? Anyone opposed? Been properly seconded. Motion carries unanimously. All right. Kelsey, I skipped over closed session with council because you're not here. I don't guess we needed to go over closed session.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on. We're on public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? An item that's not on the agenda. If it is not on the agenda, please come forward. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
State your name for the record in the microphone.
Eddie Smith.
Okay, proceed, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I used to have my waterman's card and this, that, and the other, and I let my grandson have it, and I told him to let me know when he didn't replace it. And anyhow, he let it run out and didn't let me know. I worked on the water. In fact, you worked for me when you were young.
My brother worked for you, but
Yeah, but anyhow, I got out the water business, got in the trucking business. I'm a lean tired uncle off one of the house. And I'd like to have my license back. They took my driver permit from me, so I want to die working.
is there any questions from Mr. Smith from the commission? You guys have any questions?
I got a question.
Mr. Headley?
Mr. Smith, how long has it been?
It's been a while.
do
I
you-
can't tell you. I can't tell you, Bubba. I had trucks for 20 years. And
No, I mean, how long has the license been not renewed? How many
I
years?
can't tell you.
Okay.
There's no way I can tell you. I just hoping that I could get a set and go back. I like to go Western if I could. Ain't much I can do at my age. I'm 75 years old.
Pat, do you have something to add?
Just hold on a second. We looked at Mr. Smith's records, and he did put in an exception for delayed commercial registration form last October. He has a history, he's held licenses for crab judge, pat and tong, gill nets in different times between 1987 and 2014. He has no landing reports since 1993. 10/27/14, in 2014, he transferred his car to his grandson, Michael Cody Smith. So the card was transferred. Cody held the license in 2014. He did not renew his commercial card in 2016 and has not held one since. He's now, Cody's most recently in 2018 worked as a crab agent. So it's been 10 years since Mr. Smith has had the license.
Thank you, Pat. Is there any questions from the commission? Mr. Gear, is there any questions from the commission for Mr. Smith?
No, sir, not for myself.
Mr. Smith, I would, the only suggestion I could make as the chairman is get with staff and see what, the delayed entries for the card and go through the process and see what they can do. But that being said, I would work with staff. I would get with Adam Kenyon and Chief Kenyon and see what they can do and how they can get you forward on possibly getting an early exemption card. So.
Could I ask my son-in-law, please, for me? I don't understand a whole lot y'all talk about.
You say staff to staff. You say staff to staff. I'm Albert Clark. Staff in here?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So, absolutely. Adam, you're probably going to, since you specifically mentioned oyster license, you can start with Chief Kenyon. He can get you in touch with Chief Gear on how to the card and the early exemptions and the process you got to go through with that. Okay? Thank you. All right, is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak during public comment that on items that are not on the agenda? Items, yes, ma'am, Ms. Kazmarski. Morning, how are you? Yeah, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name for the record, ma'am.
My name is Julie Kasmarsik. I'm a resident in Chesterfield County and a member of Richmond Audubon, serving as the conservation chair. I wanted to point out in the last month and a half, there has been major publication of the crisis in the Bay of menhaden and osprey starvation. 7 of the articles have been between September 12th and September 22nd of 2024. August 6th, Southern Maryland Chronicle, more osprey reproduction problems found around the Bay. September 12th, Virginian Pilot, baby osprey are starving along the Chesapeake Bay. Baltimore Sun, front page, September 14th, ospreys battling starvation. September 16th, Chesapeake Bay Magazine, study links menhaden depletion to chicks starving. September 18th, Mr. Erskine, Virginia Mercury, recreational fishers call on legislators for action on menhaden management. It's a key statement citing Mr. Gear, Pat Gear, VMRC Chief of Fisheries, stating we need the science first. We have been asking, we meaning the Coalition to Save Our Menhaden, for science. We have repeatedly been turned down for more science. My first outing here at the commission was July 25th, 2023. I remember it well because it was my birthday. And my goal was to offer you folks Dr. Brian Watts to come to the August meeting to talk about his studies. I was turned down. I was given the gavel that Dr. Watts can have his 3 minutes. You folks had the opportunity for the leading osprey ornithologist, I dare say, in the world, but I'll go country, to come and educate you. I was turned down with a 3-minute gavel stamp. September 22nd, Colonial Beach, osprey season was a disaster. And the final one was the Washington Post, Also, on September 22nd, which I do have here. Sorry, can't show it to you at the moment, but I do have it. And they were citing mystery of depletion of osprey. On September 13th of this year, Dr. Brian Watts at William & Mary has published his 2024 results of the osprey reproduction in the bay. He included 10 to 12 additional sites this year. The results are grim. There are possibly other factors besides menhaden that are causing the starvation of the osprey, but menhaden are leading the list. We need more study. We need you folks to take us seriously. You have the ability. We want, and the public is crying for, as they are increasing their readership, increasing their awareness of this problem, that we would like at least a 3-mile buffer from the Chesapeake Bay for menhaden fishing. Ultimately, we would like to see the menhaden fishing stopped. We are not asking for omega protein to close down. We're asking you to make sensible, informed decisions, and the only way that you can get that is through knowledge. And I would also offer up Dr. Brian Watts to come talk to you in October. I know he would be glad to share with you his current data.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the speaker?
Yes, sir.
Proceed.
Ma'am, you mentioned a recent article from Dr. Watts, and there were leading causes of the reduction of osprey. And you cited many reasons. What were some of those other reasons?
Other reasons which are in the news for many things, climate change, heating of water heating up, pollution, predation, which affects any type of wildlife. Great horned owls can predate on an osprey, bald eagles, Canada geese can get in their nest, which seems a little odd, but Canada geese are known to get into osprey nests. But all those things aside, after Dr. Watts' study, which has been incorrectly stated in a couple of the publications, making it look like the study just started last year, which is false. Dr. Watts' study has been going on for at least 3 decades, perhaps 4, but I know at least 30 years, that he has cumulative data on the decline, the ups and downs of the osprey population. Last year and this year as well, the production of osprey is below what it was during the height of DDT. DDT, as you remember, a pesticide which caused the thinning of eggshells of ospreys, bald eagle, and caused lack of production. We are worse than that, and we should be ashamed.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Anyone else wants to speak during public comment?
Just here's the Washington Post,
Thank you.
September 22nd this year. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak during public comment on things, on items that are not on the agenda? Not on the agenda. Only thing I will, before we move on to the new number 7, which is the crab item, we work closely with VIMS. VIMS is our scientific advisor. Chief Gear went to a workshop, and so did Deputy Chief Matson. And I, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe all parties were there. To get an invite to come here from me to speak, I would go through our scientific advisors, through our chief of fisheries, to say, hey, what item, what experts do you want to bring to speak on the matter, and we will go from there. I know you guys have been inclusive and nobody's been left out, and I do appreciate your work, and thank you, Lyle, and to Dr. Lukenbach as well. I know you guys haven't overlooked this. I know it's a hot topic. I appreciate it. As far as the study goes, we're all anticipating what the 2025 General Assembly will come out of there, and we'll see what happens, and we will be willing to help out any way we can with any information you guys may need from us. So, that being said, on to item number 7, crabs. Pat, here.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Just another point about Menhaden, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission has formed a work group that is looking at some of these issues. We just had our first meeting. There'll be another meeting next month, but it's, what we're trying to look at is other data sets that might be available. So I know Dr. Watts' information will probably be included in that.
Thank you for that, Pat. Thank you.
Okay. Here we go. All right, where's that screen go? It disappears on me all the time. There it is, okay. All right. Before I get started, I just want to give a shout out to one of my staff, Louis Gillingham. He's, he's our historian. He's probably the longest, I think 38 years at the agency. He's been our Virginia saltwater sportsman, sports fishing tournament director for years in our tagging. So whenever we need anything, historically, we go to Louis. And I know he's listening in today, so I just want to give a shout out to Louis and wish him the best, best of health and best of luck. So,
Hello, Louis.
yeah. Okay.
Definitely a valuable asset to our team.
All right, with that said, today is a request for a public hearing to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-270-10 pertaining to the blue crab fishery to consider a winter crab fishery. When I say winter crab fishery, that includes extending the pot season and a potential crab dredge fishery as well. We haven't done a lot of requests for public hearings. Some of you have been on the board before, some of you are new. We used to do them for every single item we had. So even if we were just changing a single number or a single date, we do a request for public hearing, and the next month we would do the actual public hearing. We stopped doing that about 4 or 5 years ago because it was kind of inefficient. It was taking up a lot of commission time, but we still do it for things that are very important. We did it when we established our shrimp fishery, when we did our electrofishing, when we had to do the 18% cut for striped bass, an amendment, addendum 6. Very important items, and we like to do this so it comes before the board twice. So the board gets an opportunity to see it. They can provide us feedback, so when we go to the public hearing the next month, we have better information. It also provides the public an opportunity to hear this information twice and provide comment as well. If the request is approved today, it will go before the commission on Monday, October 28th. The action that we're requesting the board to take today is to decide what measures you want advertised for that October 28th meeting. So that's all we're doing today. We're just making a decision on what's going to be advertised next month. The issues that we're having is the Code of Virginia Section 28.2-707 pertaining to the winter dredge season says it will open December 1st through March 31st unless the commission votes otherwise. In 2008, the commission voted to close the dredge season and repeal all of its relevant regulations, and they did that because a time when we were in a disaster state, fishery disaster. The commission has had to vote every year since then to decide whether or not the fishery was going to open. And we had that in one regulation. It was Chapter 4 VAC 20-1140, the prohibition of crab dredging in Virginia waters. And this past year in June, when we brought forth our crab regulations, that regulation was repealed. So right now, we have no regulations for crab dredging. The only thing we have is that season set in code. So without action from the commission, the crab dredge season will open December 1st with no regulations in place at this point to manage it. So just want to make that point. That's where we're at right now. And I mentioned the fishery disaster, how we got there. In 2008, there was a blue crab fishery resource disaster. We had 10 years of below average, well below average abundance and harvest as well. All the jurisdictions in the Chesapeake Bay, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Maryland, and Virginia, each had to take a 34% reduction in effort. Half of that reduction in Virginia was the closing of the dredge fishery. And these were some of the other items that were put into that as well. So it wasn't just the crab dredge fishery that was taken out. The other reductions came from reducing individual pot limits, increasing coloring, shortening the female harvest season, increasing minimum size limits for peeler crabs. These were the reasons that this is directly from a 2010 public hearing that we had in our evaluation. The reasons why the crab dredge fishery closure occurred in 2008. Some of these are still valid. Some of them can also, aren't. Some of them can be mitigated. The high rate of females to males harvested, it's still true. It's still somewhere between 85 and 90% of the harvest in the crab dredge fishery is females. Those are females that are overwintering, and when they wake up in the spring, they're going to be spawning and producing eggs. There's a high degree of waste, which can be incidental mortality, which can be mitigated by dredging over soft bottoms and not using divers. Divers are devices that are attached to the dredge, which makes it dig deeper. So some of the processors would like to see us have an extended season of some sort, a winter season for crabs, so that we have product year-round. The concern is we shut down this year, December 20th, and we don't open until 3 months later, and they have to get those markets back. So having something that we can have a continuous market through the year is important to them. So I think you might have seen this, but if some of you are new and haven't seen this, how we manage our blue crab fishery is through the blue crab. The data we use is through the Blue Crab Baywide Winter Dredge Survey, and it's a survey that's been done since the winter of 1989, 1990. It's done by VIMS and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. They sample 1,500 random sites from December through March in the main stem bay and the tributaries. And the objectives are to describe the size and sex composition on a baywide basis so that we can come up with estimates of abundance for males, females, juvenile males, juvenile females, adult females, so different aspects of the life history. And also to estimate exploitation and fishing mortality so the stock can be evaluated each year. The responsibility for this data and the products that come out of it are from the NOAA Chesapeake Bay office's Chesapeake Bay Stock Assessment Committee, CBSAC. This is a group of resource managers from all the states and as well as scientists around the bay. When the results come in, they meet, they discuss the results, they make some recommendations of management actions for the year, and then the states will go ahead and implement those if it's necessary. I want to state that this is a cooperative between the states. It's so one state, when something is decided, it's through consensus, and everyone agrees. A couple of years ago, we had to take a 10% cut in harvest because of drastically declining juveniles, males, and females are also reducing. So we took a 10% reduction in overall harvest, and all the states, agreed to try to meet that goal. In 2024, their recommendations were to maintain status quo. When you do a stock assessment, the purpose of a stock assessment is to determine determine the health of a population and using existing data in statistical models. One of the outputs we get from that are biological reference points, which can be used to evaluate the stock from year to year. Presently, our stock assessment was initially done in 2011, and it hasn't been updated since. We've been using the same method since 2011. I will say that's a very, very long time between stock assessments. Typically, it's 3 to 5 years. For blue crabs being a short-lived species, it probably should be 3, but it's expensive to do. We got funding, and we're underway now. We're doing a new benchmark, and when you do a benchmark, you're taking into account new data sets, new methods, new modeling, so we can come up with a whole new gamut of methodologies and how we manage this. But how we're managing it now and how we've managed since 2011 is on biological reference points on the female abundance female abundance, and the female exploitation rate. And that exploitation rate is the percent of female crabs that are removed from the stock from fishing. So what percent is taken from fishing? So these reference points and the numbers on here can change when we do the updates from year to year. But right now, when you look at this graph, the red line is the threshold. That's the low value for abundance. You do not want to go below that value. You can see prior to the 2008, when we had that disaster declaration, we were at or below that value on a regular basis for almost 14 years. And since the initiation of reduction of effort, 34% starting in 2009, you can see how the population of females jumped back up, and it's only been below that threshold once. That threshold is set at 72.5 million pounds right now. The green line is the target. That's where, if you're above the target, everything's sustained, everything's great, everything's wonderful. The population is fully recovered, and that's set at 196 million pounds right now. You can see we've only been above that a couple times, but it's okay to be between that red and that green line. That's okay. You don't want to see what we're seeing in recent years, where we're seeing a declining trend. And that's what we've seen the last few years. So that's a little bit alarming. And when we had that big dip in 2002, that was the lowest year for juveniles and for adult males as well. So, but hopefully we'll see some recovery. We saw some in 2023 and, bouncing around. But you expect to see it to bounce in that range. We'd rather have it closer to the green line, but we expect to see it to bounce in there. The exploitation rate is just the reverse, okay? The threshold is the high value that you don't want to go over. If you do that, you're overfishing the stock. It means you're taking out, in this case, you're taking out too many females to be able to, maintain the population. And you can see prior to that level, which is set at 37%, we were above that level several times before 2009. Since then, we haven't been anywhere near that value. And we've been at the target, which is set at 28%. And you want to be at or near that target. You want to be a little bit below it. You don't want to go over it. You want to try to hover around. Look, if you can get close to it, it's good. You don't want to go over. But, you want to stay, near that line or a little bit below it. So, and basically in 2014, the stock was not overfished and overfishing was not occurring. So moving on, I think I mentioned this previously. In June, when we came forward, typically what we do is we get the results from the winter dredge survey. The CBSAC meets. We meet with our Crab Management Advisory Committee, and then we come before the board to suggest regulations for the 2024-25 season. The season begins July 5th and runs through the next year. And in that meeting, one of our regulations, 1140, which is the prohibition of crab dredge in Virginia waters, that typically we bring that up, and until this year, it was always like, no, continue the prohibition. This year, the commission, you all decided to basically repeal that regulation entirely. But another motion was, and that was by a 5-4 vote. Another motion was made to direct staff to start looking to what a crab dredge regulation would look like and bring it to you before today. That motion passed unanimously. So we got our marching orders from you all, and then we set out and started talking to our Crab Management Advisory Committee. This is a group of, it's crabbers from different sectors, from around the state. There's some potters, there's some soft-shell crab people, there's some dealers as well, there's a recreational crabber on it. It's a mix of crabbers representing their area and their expertise. And we met twice with a professional facilitator in July and August to discuss the winter dredge fishery and help staff create a framework for a future dredge fishery. When I say framework, it's like what that fishery would look like. How many people, how much quota, how much is the daily catch limit, what kind of gear you can use, those kind of things. So all the things that go into managing a fishery. Some of the topics that we were discussing and we wanted input on was conservation equivalency. Basically, because of those reductions that we took in 2008 for the 2009 season, conservation equivalency, if we open a dredge fishery and have additional harvest, it would be expected that would be paid back in other sectors of the fishery. So we'd probably, most likely in the pot fishery, we'd have to adjust regulations to maintain that harvest. So that's something that basically the staff supported, NOAA Chesapeake Bay office and CBSAC supported, and VIM supported as well. And like I said, these are the other items: the dredge quota, the number of licenses, who would be eligible, the dredging area, and the season, gear restrictions, and any kind of quota management we have. So the first meeting was pretty much just to discuss, get some background, get some information, what they wanted us to look at, and come back in the August meeting and discuss each one of these topics and see where we wanted to go with each one of them. And so we did that, and we started off, the professional facilitator was trying to get consensus on each one of those items, but we went, started going a little bit off course and started going right into some proposals and motions. So we didn't really cover every one of those items in our presentation when we went there. So we ended up with several proposals. One proposal was for a 2024-25 dredge fishery opening, which would be based on a revised 2013 plan. There was a plan that CMAC and the staff put together and proposed to the commission in October of 2013. That proposal was defeated unanimously by the board, 7-0 at the time. There was a proposal to open the crab pot fishery year-round with no seasonal closures and do not open the dredge fishery. We discussed that a little bit. There was a proposal that the dredge fishery will not open until the stock assessment is done. And we're in the middle of a stock assessment. It's normal not to make major changes to a fishery. After a lot of discussion, there were a number of things. There was a combination of all these things put together, and there was a vote approved 8-5 to have a crab pot season which would extend the season from pretty much from March 1st to December 31st, moving forward, and to not open the dredge fishery until after the stock assessment in 2026, but the committee will continue to discuss that framework. The reason why we want to do this is because, again, we have no framework, we have no regulations right now, or we have no plan for what this fishery would look like. The CMAC did not really endorse a singular proposal. So as a result, what we'd want to do is have a regulation that has pretty much an on-off switch for, are we going to open the dredge fishery? And if the answer is yes each year, the regulation is already, the information on the criterion on how that fishery will look will already be in the regulation. So that's when we talk about framework, having it in there already so we don't have to rush to get things done, and have it in there so everybody knows in advance if the season's going to open, this is what it's going to look like. Okay. Since CMAC did not approve opening a crab dredge fishery this year, we started looking at the extension of the season. The extension of the season probably would benefit more people. There's a lot more crab potters, over 1,100 of them. I think we were estimating would probably be between 35 and 50 crab dredgers, so there's a lot more people potting for crabs, so it'd be more beneficial to them to maybe extend the season. We have, typically the season ends December 30th. We have extended it 5 times in the past into December, and these are the years and the dates. It shows the harvest for each year, and you can see each one of those years, that harvest is less than 1% of the annual harvest. And the number of participants is between 5 and 10% per year. It's not a whole lot. Usually what happens when December comes around, a lot of the crabbers start switching to oystering, but this would give an opportunity for fishermen, watermen to have another opportunity. They can either oyster or they can crab. We are seeing warming water temperatures, not only in the ocean, but in the bay as well. So it's quite likely that, crabbing can continue, well into December. So, this is a graph, these are 2 graphs just showing the harvest from, early November through December and the number of participants. And you can see they're pretty much, declining pretty rapidly, over those years. It hasn't been a big fishery in December, but we would give opportunity. This would just give additional opportunity. Now, March is a little bit different story. We've only had 1 year where we opened earlier. We opened in 2017. We opened on March 1st. This was a result of the 2015-2016 winter dredge fishery, where the abundance was very high, and the commission voted to basically extend the season to December 20th and open the spring season March 1st. So the 2016 on the last one for December coincides with this because it was high abundance. And you can kind of see it was about 2% of the harvest that year. About 20% of the fishermen actually participated in that year, in that fishery early on. You know, we don't have a lot of information here. We just have that one data point. But the following year after that, the juvenile abundance from the juvenile and the female abundance from the winter dredge survey went down, so they did not continue this the following year after this, after 2017. And if you look at this, the numbers are all over the place. When this is looking at from 2012 to 2024, our late March, the season begins the 17th through April. It bounces all over the place. It's participation and harvest is all over the place, primarily because of water temperature. Water temperature is driving them. Whether or not there's going to be a significant March fishery. So, and you can see that in this graph here because this is basically showing temperature and harvest. And it shows each year, and that line is showing the trend. Basically, the theme behind this is if the water temperatures are higher in March, you're more likely going to catch crabs. 9 degrees Celsius or 48 degrees Fahrenheit is the point where crabs are believed to stop feeding. So at that point, crab potting may become less effective. And you can see there's a lot of years that have occurred that we've been above that, and you can kind of see, I don't have a pointer on here, but you can see 2024 and 2023 and 2020 were all on that upper end. The 2012 was so high because the water temperatures were just, unbelievably, they were abnormally high for that year. So that's why, the temperature and the harvest was much higher. So the key to this is that warming water temperatures mean there'll be more harvest into March. The problem is, we can't predict what's going to happen. We don't know. So it is a little bit of a question mark with this. So in summary, the CMAC, the Crab Management Advisory Committee, declined to make any recommendations on the crab dredge fishery framework at this time. The CMAC did recommend an extension of the crab pot fishery in lieu of opening the winter dredge fishery. It benefits more people. There is limited data available to assess the potential impact of extending the crab pot season. We feel pretty comfortable with December. We feel that because we have some information on that. A little less so in March, but there are some implications of that because environmental factors are so variable. And we just won't know. I mean, if we want to extend it to March 1st, but there has been a trend. If you look at the bay water temperatures over the winter time, they are they're increasing at a higher rate than the rest of the other months. We're not seeing much of a winter anymore in the bay. So as a result, we may be seeing that this is a valid thing to shift the season a little bit longer. Okay. Public comment. We received a number of written comments opposing crab dredging. We received them from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, a recreational fishing group, the Friends of the Rappahannock, the NOAA Chesapeake Bay Office Sustainable Fisheries Goal Implementation Team. That's the mother organization to CBSAC, the Virginia Twin Rivers Watermen's Association. We received 6 online comments. We did not receive any comments in support of crab dredging. And VIMS has recommendations that should be in your packet that will provide what conditions they would support dredging. So under certain conditions, VIMS would support dredging, but those conditions have to be met. And is Ram here at this point? Ram is here, so if you have any questions, we can ask Ram about that. So what we're asking you to do today is we have to come up with how we're going to advertise this fishery for a public meeting, a public hearing. So we want to advertise public hearing to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-270 pertaining to the blue crab fishery. Since we don't have any regulations for crab dredging anymore, we're going to put the crab dredging regulations in this existing regulation at this point. If the board if the board's opinion is to keep close the winter dredge fishery for 2024-25, we will go forward and have an October public hearing on that. If they want us to move forward with a 2024-25 crab dredge season, we'll have to do 2 things. We have to develop that framework, and because the season will open on December 1 by code, if we don't do anything, In October, we will have to delay the default season, so we will have to set an opening date in October, then come back in December with the framework for approval. So there would be 2 public hearings we would have to do for that. So because otherwise our meeting is on December 3rd, there'd be 3 days, at least 3 days that the fishery technically could be open. So you have to choose one or the other here. The other item to consider is advertising in the same regulation just to extend the crab pot season. So that's what we just talked about, extension from, it would be from March 1st to December 31st. And I think I have one last thing. So this is your advertisement, the decision we have to do. It would be to advertise public hearing to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-270-10 pertaining to the blue crab fishery 2, decide how to advertise, are we going to open or close the crab dredging for the 2024-25 season, and decide how to advertise for modifying the crab pot season. Either way, what you do, the staff will continue to work with CMAQ on a crab dredge fishery framework for potential future openings. We don't want to get in this situation again where we don't have any regulations and, we're trying to scurry to get something done. I'll take any questions at this point, and then I'll turn it over to Ram if anybody has any questions for Ram.
Any question? Mr. Branson?
Yes, sir. Chief Gear, thank you. The season normally opens up mid-March.
March
15th, 17th. If we were to open it up or consider opening up on the 1st of March, the crabs that are harvested in that 2-week, roughly 17-day period would be the pre-spawn females, correct?
Still will be, yes.
And that's that's what we discussed in June when we made our decision to repeal the winter dredge fishery. But that's the exact crabs that we want to preserve and protect so that we don't have a problem later on in the year with adult or juvenile abundance. Okay. Extending it in December, however, that would be a mix of both crabs, right? It'd be adult females, adult males,
Yeah.
because all the crabs have come out of hibernation and done their thing.
Well, extending the season in March, they can fish, they'll be able to pot in the rivers as well, so that would be a mix of males and females.
In early March?
Yes.
In that 2 weeks in March, okay. My point was that I thought that the winter crab dredge fishery was the most beneficial to our overwintering pre-spawn females, and that opening it in March would make them more at risk of being harvested and therefore have more effect. You showed a slide that showed 2%, I guess, when the
That's
1 year that you did
2% for crabs, not just females, 2% of all crabs.
Of all crabs. But I would assume that most of those are probably females?
We usually run between 55 and 60%
Okay.
females.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Edwards?
I have a question, and maybe it was stated up here and I just overlooked it. When you met for the 2 times with the groups, the first time that they came back, they recommended opening for the winter dredging. When it came back the second time in August, they recommended with the stipulations of not opening. What data did they have, or who spoke to these groups to make them change their mind?
I think any proposal that included conservation equivalency, that was probably the breaking point, because if conservation equivalency was required, at that point, when the staff supported that, NOAA Chesapeake Bay Office, CBSAC supported that, and VIM supported that, it would mean that the crab potters would probably have to take a cut and harvest.
Right.
And so that was probably the emphasis for not wanting to have a crab dredge fishery, not approving it.
And then my second question, I got the information from VIMS, and it said that it would reduce, if we did have the drudgery, it would reduce the spring crab potting in numbers. Did you all say the number that it would be reduced to?
I didn't. Maybe Ram can answer that.
Those different categories.
Please come forward. You weren't here when we swore everybody in, so I got to swear you in, I think. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name for the record, please.
Lipsius from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And so we were going to leave that to the staff. The other thing that we were considering that I think we would support is, as a conservation equivalency, to potentially
prohibit the take of sponge crabs for about 4 weeks during the midsummer, when they likely suffer high mortality going into traps and such. You toss them back, even with the black sponge crab ban, you toss back the other ones, they have a low probability of survival. So we think something like that, that would also be an equivalency for extending the pod season. Just to emphasize, crabs in the spring, about, I would say, 85% of the crabs in the spring, females, are going to be first-time spawners. They have never spawned. So that's why we are emphasizing that if there is a dredge fishery, which we would support over mud bottom because there's low incidental mortality, we would want to see that conservation equivalency sometime during the spawning season, spring or spawning season, which is why potentially the prohibition of sponge crabs at a certain time of year would, I think, would work. Although staff would also need to look at what that equivalency is. So we don't have those data. That's staff has those data.
Would that be based on the number of people that were dredging, or would it be based just on general guidelines, regardless of how many boats went out dredging?
You want to?
Yeah, if there was a quota, I mean, it wouldn't matter how many boats go out. I mean, there would still, the incidental mortality may be higher if there were more boats, maybe, but overall, there was, the plan was, the plan in 2013 had a maximum quota for the fishery.
Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you. Whether it's for you, Chief, or you, sir, the ongoing benchmark stock assessment, how impacted would it be if we were to change the regulations, extending the season or the dredge fishery, but mostly the season? How will that affect the results or influence the benchmark stock assessment?
You go first and I'll go.
Because it seems to me that, to add context, it seems to me that we've got this benchmark stock assessment in process now. For us to change the way we've been doing business since 2008 could have an impact. What's the impact of doing that? What's the risk to the benchmark stock assessment?
The impact would be fairly straightforward, I think, because it would just be looking at the abundance of females in the winter dredge survey and the exploitation rate. So if those change, then that's what the stock assessment would be using. So that's fundamentally no different than what we used to do before 2008.
Mike Wilberg from University of Maryland, who's leading up the stock assessment, told me that because there was a period when dredging was allowed when the survey was going on, so they're going to, in their assessment, they're going to be looking at the dredge fishery before and after. So he said they hope to be working it into their models.
Okay.
Mr. Hurst?
Thank you, Chief Gear. I had a question about effort. And is there any difference in effort between the months of December and March? So a late season and the early season?
There you go. There's March for 17, 1,200 trips. So it's about 1/6, well, about 1/3.
Okay, so the first table you had on there of the March one, what year? That was 2017?
That was the one year we had.
Only time it was open early.
The only time it was open early, about 1,200 trips.
Okay.
For that month. Now, if you want to compare that to 16, which was when we did that, it was 393 trips. So, what, maybe 1/3 in December? I think the thing is, in December, crabbers have other options to go oystering. A lot of them will go into oystering. And it's like, when the season opens, it's like gangbusters wanting to get out there and start crabbing.
Right, and follow up, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I understand it's kind of a fraction of what it might be in March, and I understand the fisheries are a little bit different between oyster and other things in December. But I do think it's an important thing to look at should there be an extended opening. As a follow-up question, should the season be extended either December or open early in March, would there have to be conservation equivalency measures to that, similar that we were talking about with the crab dredge. Should that open, there had to be conservation equivalencies. So if the pot season is extended, is there a need for conservation equivalencies?
That would be something that we'd probably go to CBSAC with and ask. I would have to ask CBSAC about that, and then know with Chesapeake Bay office, you know, that group.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Now, we have opened it those years, and there was no conservation equivalency on those years. The years that it opened.
those extensions
There was
on
no
those
conservation equivalency required.
Okay. Well, so I have another follow-up, sorry. There was never a year or season that was extended such as we're suggesting here on both ends?
No, the 2006 into the 2017 season.
Okay, so the 16
So,
to
so
the
the, so
17.
we get the information in June, and they extended the season in 2016 through 12/20, and then they also extended, you know, the March season.
Okay.
So it was like technically 2 seasons, but the way we manage it is
Yeah.
we do it across, you know, that time period.
Right, okay, thank you.
Mr. Headley?
When you did extend it in March of 2017, the first 14 days of the season was open, wasn't it reduced bushel limits though? So that would have been conservation?
I don't know, I'll have to look into that for you.
I think it was. Because I think it went back to the 47 bushel limit on the 17th.
It's probably what we would normally do, yeah.
Mr. Headley?
You stated that the dredge fishery has a high rate of females. Will the spring fishery, where it is in the same area, is it not a high rate of females too?
Yeah, I didn't say the same area, I said in general, it's about 60%.
But I was asking in the same area.
I don't know. We'd have to look into that.
This may be just more or less a comment, sir. My comment is regarding those trips in December. It should be a natural trend too, as far as where those trips are being taken from, right? And so that's going to be more in the southern part of the bay where a lot of that's happening. So you had the migration of the crab, and big part of it is the male, where he migrates on out, and it's being followed. Now, in the spring, those numbers are up high because you have a high market value worth on that bushel as far as dollars in a pocket for a crabber. So you get a lot of people that will travel to the crab, but in the winter, you don't have that market, nor do you have that travel to follow. You have, mostly on the southern end of the bay, you have that, right?
Typically, you know, the waters are going to be a little bit warmer in the southern bay.
Yes, sir.
The temperatures that we used on this were from a point in mid-bay.
Okay.
So, okay, instead of, you know, we know that, Lynn Haven is probably going to have, they may have even a longer season that they can crab versus Rappahannock would be shorter. So we took a station that had long-term data set of daily records, and that's what we use for this. So, you know, so these numbers on this graph are for the mid-bay.
Any more questions for Mr. Gear? Thank you, Pat. Thank you. All right. That being said, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this matter? I know Mr. Tankard is here. Mr. Tankard, do you want the floor first or last? Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, sir.
State your name for the record, please.
Ed Tankard. I'm chairman of the Crab Management Advisory Committee. And I'll just say that the committee is a fairly significant size. We have a lot of young members today compared to what we had years ago. We have a lot of energy. We still have a lot of our older fellows, like Pete Nixon is still on the committee. So I think we have a wide range of crabbers, and geographically, and as well, and how they crab and what their feelings about crabbing are. And I would say one thing that is apparent with a lot of the crabbers on the committee today is that they enjoy this fall fishery. That the price is good for them. They think it is a very good fishery for them. A lot of the younger crowd. And one of the things you mentioned, what happened in the second meeting, I think what became apparent was the conservation equivalency issue, where a lot of these crabbers are like, hold on, I don't want to give up my slice of my size of the pie to accommodate a fishery that I might or may not participate in, the crab dredge fishery. So I think that's what kind of played out to make the motion by, I forget the young man's name, but to say, hey, look, let's look at the assessment of what's out there and then decide about the dredge fishery, but let's not move forward with it now. So I think that's what took place in that second meeting. And then I also would say, you know, you had some, like Doug Jenkins, for instance, testified or stated in the first meeting that, you know, they've had a horrible season on the Potomac River, the worst in his history. And so I think there is sort of some unease in the fishery at large, you know, that the fishery is not as healthy as it should be. And so, you know, when you hear a testimony from a fellow who's been crabbing for as long as Jenkins has, since the 60s, that had an influence, I suppose. And then one of the other things we heard from public comment period we had was one of the processors was like, look, we can truck up crabs from the south and process them in our facilities, and we're paying more for that crab than we might pay for a Delaware crab that's been dredged. So that sort of, I think, was a point that was made that had some influence in decision process. So that's kind of very much a boil down of what had happened. But again, a lot of energy, a lot of good folks, and you know, these guys are fishermen. They're professional fishermen. They economics and businesses, you know, at the forefront of their decision processes. So they're not it's not a group of folks who are not in the crabbing just for the fun of it. They're out there to make a living. So, any questions?
Any questions from Mr. Erskine?
Ed, it's good to see you. I appreciate your work on the advisory committee and all those interested stakeholders getting together. That's key to what I think the process here, what we're talking about. I had a question about CMAQ specifically, and I'm not sure if it was the first meeting or the second meeting necessarily, but Chief Gear presented the reduction that was taken by the jurisdictions. I think it was 10% reduction. Did the committee discuss that at all, and how that impacted, you know, either effort or other jurisdictions? You mentioned Mr. Jenkins. You know, he represents the Potomac tributaries, and he fishes in there. So that's a different jurisdiction. Did they all take that reduction, and was there any discussion at the advisory committee about that?
You know, Mr. Erskine, I can't say that I remember any discussion in that regard.
Any more questions? No? Well, Mr. Tankett, thank you. Thank you, and I really do appreciate you chairing CMAQ. You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you, and the moderator, I think she you know, maybe she was frustrated. I appreciate you allowing us to have a moderator for that. I think it helped bring more conversation to the issue. So thank you for making that effort for us.
Absolutely, and I think in the future, we probably could use the moderator in other committees too as well. The one thing I liked about it, I listened in on the second one. I was there for the first one, and when Ron was talking, I learned, and I talked to him sidebar since then. Is there was so much information that was, you know, went over in that committee during this process that most people that were involved hadn't heard all of it, at least hadn't heard it at one time. I heard bits and pieces when maybe the crab dredge fishery was open and maybe it wasn't, but once it closed, you didn't hear that information anymore. And VIMS is still taking the same data points and they're getting the same information. So it was good to see that information again, because it had been years since most of them, especially having a new committee and young committee, most of them probably hadn't seen them data points. So it was real good to see. So, but thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Mr. Moore, how are you?
How are you?
Doing all right. State your name for the record.
Chris Moore.
You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, thank
Proceed.
you. Chris Moore, Virginia Executive Director, Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things. First of all, the leadership by Commissioner Tankard has really been helpful in the Crab Management Advisory Committee. I want to thank Commissioner Green and the staff for investing the time with the facilitator. Also, I think there's a little bit of confusion about the meetings and the votes. The vote that we had on the crab dredge fishery was actually our last meeting in the spring, which I believe was May, right? The first meeting, once we got the facilitator, we didn't take any votes. We just had discussion and things like that. And then it was the second meeting where we actually we tried to test for consensus and have votes. So we haven't actually supported a crab dredge fishery once we got into this process. So I just wanted to set the record straight a little bit on that. I do think the facilitated process really helped bring all the issues to the forefront. As you heard, there was concerns about abundance in a lot of different areas. There was concerns about conservation equivalency. There were concerns about the fact that if we have a crab dredge fishery, some watermen are now going to kind of get a jump start on other fishermen who are actually fishing as well. And so there were a host of concerns about what opening a crab dredge fishery would look like. And the facilitated process gave us the opportunity to discuss those over 2 meetings. And I think that was really, really helpful. And I think it's why we ended up with the recommendation you saw, which we actually kind of had 2 test votes during that second meeting. One was, not to open a crab dredge fishery, and that was very clearly supported. Then we also had the second vote, which was still in support of not having a crab dredge fishery and open these season extensions. So I just wanted to clear those pieces up. And I do want to, like I say, talk about the fact that I really do think those 2 meetings were really helpful in getting all the data on the table, getting all the issues out there, and coming to maybe not a consensus, but I think generally supportive of not having a crab dredge fishery at this time, waiting to get through the stock assessment, and continuing to work on what one might look like in the future. And so I hope today that you all will go out with a public notice to close the fishery again this year. We can obviously continue our work. If you want to include the season extensions, I understand we as the CMAQ represented that. It's not one of my favorites about this because I think you all set very good seasons based on the information you had available back in June. But again, I think the most important part for us has been the fact that you have seen that change in the CMAQ because the information that was offered by staff, because of the very good facilitation process. And I hope that you'll follow their lead when it comes to the crab dredge fishery for this upcoming season. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Moore?
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you for chairing one of the meetings too, by the way. You did a great job, and people underestimate the work that goes on in these committees. Mr. Tankard knows, he's been here so long working with the commission. That was 2 hours of cramming 25 years worth of data, 35 years worth of data in 2 different meetings, and it's very with 15 different opinions at the table. So it's very tough, but I honestly think that was a good model to build on, and we can even do better. And I'm going to be getting with you and Chairman Tankard to see what we can do in the future on building this management plan and having them trigger points and data points right at our fingertips with VIMS.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on this matter? Anyone else in the audience wish please come forward? Please state your name for the record.
Mark Sanford.
You swear to tell the whole truth and much truth so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Proceed.
I'm on CMAQ, and I've been crabbing probably for 40 years, and I crab down on the lower bay. I'm opposed to opening the dredge fishery this year. And the reason why, the equivalency that I saw was basically you shut down the crab pot fishery November 8th or 16th. And, I crab in the lower bay. I crab all the way up to the end. Even before then, before we had a season, I would go all the way to Christmas, and sometimes I start in February, and, usually the 1st of March, and I make all my money at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. And, so that's where I stand. And I think we need to continue to work towards the dredge fishery, but we need to look at the equivalency to that. I think that it was taken away in a way that wasn't fair to the dredgers. And I do think that they need to have an opportunity to do it again. So that's all I got to say.
Any questions, Mr. Erskine?
Mr. Sanford, with these conservation equivalencies, meaning if they were to extend the season December and March, would you then be in favor of, as Dr. Lipschitz mentioned, a closure in the middle of the season for sponge crabs?
honestly, I don't even remember about the sponge crab, closure. I want something that's going to work, that's going to help the fishery, and there's too many regulations on the books that, in my mind, don't make sense and don't help the fishery. And one of them is the black sponge law. Here, we're on bushel limits, and really honestly, last year I tried to catch sponge crabs. I threw over 45 or 50 bushels of sponge crabs that were hockey pucks, which is no legs, no claws, that could be thrown in a basket and basically sold to a picking house. I would have had my bushel limits and I would have went on my way. But instead, I stayed out there and ground on it until I had enough crabs to go in, is what I did. We need to put laws on the books that are going to do something, is what we need to do, and stop, the stuff that doesn't work, is what it comes down to.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the speaker? Mr. Hadley?
Thank you, Mr. Sanford. Mr. Erskine talked about the closure of the sponge crab that Dr. Lipschitz brought up. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I sell mostly clean crabs because that's where I make my money. I get more money for those, a lot more than your average crabber, because I go to retail. They don't want sponge crabs. It wouldn't affect me personally, but it would affect other people, and, we should just look into that. I'm open to everything that's going to help, is what I'm open to.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Sanford. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on the crab item? Anyone else wish to speak on this item? Please come forward. Please state your name for the record.
Nathan Reynolds.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Proceed.
Commissioner, I appreciate the time. Just wanted to hit really quick. I'm on CMAC as well from Cape Charles, Virginia. One thing that just got mentioned was the sponge crab closure, and we had discussed that a little bit regarding conservation equivalency. That would shut down pretty much 90% of the fishermen on the Eastern Shore by closing that. And I understand that's a big picture item, right? We're trying to look at everything throughout the bay. That could be detrimental to the commercial crabbers on the Eastern Shore. Beyond that, I wasn't in support of crab dredging if it was going to affect the over 750 active crab potters. That's what we're looking at. I'm not trying to pin one thing against another person. When we're talking about conservation equivalency, that was the game changer for me on CMAC. If you look at the numbers of actual crab dredging and the percentage of what our catch is, it's very, very minimal compared to crab potting and PO potting. So when all the information got brought out and we said, okay, we're willing to go crab dredging for the benefit of 25 to 40 boats, that wasn't determined. And then we started talking about conservation equivalency and cutting numbers again for crab potters that carries us through, we'll say 9 months out of the year, 8 to 9 months out of the year for some folks. We couldn't do that. In big picture wise, we're looking to extend the benefit for the watermen as well as the state when it comes to the market value of a crab. The slide that was up here earlier displayed the month of March. It said 2% of the entire year's catch, but that was the entire month of March. We already have March 17th forward. So we're only actually talking about adding 2 weeks at the beginning and then the month of December, where a lot of folks already transition. It's less than 1% of catch every year. So that's why we're trying to push that to stay in the market longer with a quality crab and not have to go down the road of trying to move these dredge crabs that aren't the highest quality, because we have that southern crab coming up from Louisiana, Mississippi to kind of carry us through. If the trend continues, the Chesapeake Bay is going to end up having crabs that crawl all winter. We're not going to have the way it is over the last 10, 12 years. Every year it's earlier and earlier. In some years, we've all seen it where you can crab pot in February, but it shuts back down in 3-4 weeks sometimes, and won't open back up to actually be able to catch the crab until the end of March. So trying to piece all this big picture together will make a big difference down the road as we work to try to build that framework for the dredge fishery. We can extend the season. That would help everybody, upwards of 800 people in the state, and help the state as well as building the frameworks to how we can go about this crab dredge fishery without affecting all those 800 crab potters. That's what I would hope we can work towards as we get that benchmark back.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Reynolds? Any questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on the crab? No. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this? No, I don't think. All right, well, that being said, matters before the commission.
I have a question, Mr. Commissioner. And you should be able to, well, I don't know that you'll be able to answer. It was based off of your slide, sir. I guess I have a concern. If you go back to one of the slides, it showed the decrease over the last, the span, keep going back. It showed a decrease in current 2024 as far as the harvest, that right there. I guess we're looking at 23 is the second to last dot, sir? Is that what we're looking at? And currently 24, we're looking at, it's fallen a little bit. And so is there, besides, and this is based off of harvest numbers currently?
No, this is based on the winter dredge survey.
Oh, okay.
So this is abundance, the total number of crabs estimated from the winter dredge survey.
Understood. All right, so I think that's where my concern, I was like, wasn't clear on that. The other piece I have to speak, I would like to speak, Mr. Commissioner, on, I am totally against any kind of pot restriction for something that does carry on. And so that piece there, that was a little sensitive when I saw that myself, following along with the CMAQ along the way when they were discussions in the notes. Because I feel like the potters, which I fall in that boat too, so I try not to speak biased on this, but I feel like they've already taken a pretty big hit. I got a lot of notes because you guys gave a lot of great information. I personally, myself, based on the CMAQ's proposal, I don't know what we have at this point other than my personal opinion, especially based off of what we just previously did with the oyster season. There's a lot of preparation on these crab dredgers that would have to go through. And if we were talking about a season that would open potentially in December, and us not releasing a regulation to some point in December, there's a considerable amount of money that needs to be spent and invested to get ready for this. I think we need to show that, what I would love for VMRC to advertise is that we've got a great plan moving forward, and they allow the watermen who are going to be able to participate, be able to prepare for that months in advance instead of now, since we don't have any sort of framework, as you quoted it earlier. So just more or less an opinion from my view.
Mr. Erskine?
Since you have that slide up, I do have a question. We clearly see the black vertical line as 2008 when it was closed and the dredge fishery was closed, and there's clearly an increase in the adult females. But after that time period, there's a precipitous decline twice.
Yeah, I know 2014 was environmental factors. I think there was another year we had a lot of winter mortality.
Yeah. We didn't see, what happened, it was high juvenile abundance, but we didn't see that in adults. And my opinion is that it was really high predation pressure that just happened. That was a unique explosion of red drum.
Yeah, I believe the MREP numbers indicated almost a 10-time increase in red drum in 2012. But 2014 was because of winter mortality.
As a follow-up, then the latter part of the more recent end of that graph, what do you believe that's due to predation as well, or environmental factors?
I think it's a lot. Yes, it's a lot of things, and that's one of the reasons we're doing a new stock assessment is because, as Tom Miller put it, something has changed in the last 10 to 15 years, and we're not sure what it is. Yes, we have blue cat predation, we have red drum predation. Warming water temperatures. There's a lot of factors going on. So,
If I could just
go ahead.
you want me to go over?
Yes, I would like you to, because we need to get it on the record. You're killing me over there, Ron. Got to move the table closer.
Yes, so I think one of the real concerns that we have is that the last 3 years in the winter dredge survey, we've had very low, extremely low juvenile abundance. And there's a tight correlation between juvenile abundance and subsequent adult abundance. And I think that keeping the female abundance low, I think, is at least in large part due to that. Remember that what we want is we want the adult female abundance to be bouncing around that green line. Yes, it's good that it's not close to the threshold, but we'd rather have it bouncing around. So there's something going on, and we're not really sure what's going on as far as what's affecting that juvenile abundance. It could be the predation, it could be environmental factors, it could be something changing with the currents that prevent enough juveniles or post-larvae for blue crabs to come back into the bay. Remember that what happens, the females hatch out the larvae go offshore for about 4 weeks. So they're offshore outside the bay, and any of a number of things can affect them out there. And then the post-larvae come back into the bay and set that juvenile abundance in that next season. So there's something going on. We feel that the spawning stock explains about half of the variation. So if you look at the variation in the population, we feel that having enough females explains about half of that. The other half, environment, predators, and such. So
I follow up, Commissioner. So in part of that, a number of years ago, I believe either CMAC or VIMS were discussing, does the variability attribute to male abundance? And whether or not, there was a depletion in the male abundance. Clearly, female abundance is tracked very well.
yeah, so I just had a doctoral student finish their dissertation. They focused specifically on reproduction, females. And by the way, one thing that she found is that the James River, the lower bay James River, warms up much sooner than the main stem of the bay and stays warmer later. I just wanted to say, because Pat mentioned that about the Lynnhaven, but there's actual information out there on that. But what she found, she did a thorough study to look at what's called sperm limitation. How much are the males having to do with that? And she found no evidence that there's sperm limitation, very little. The evidence that she presented basically shows that it's not, that it's still the spawning stock. And the reason is that males, a single male can mate with a female, with females multiple times in a year. It takes a male, after mating, it takes a male about 2 weeks to be able to produce enough sperm then to mate again. So a single male can inseminate or mate with probably, he can probably mate 4 to 6 times or so or more during the year. And I think that's probably why we don't have that. In addition, females, only about 10% of females survive after a first spawning season. So there aren't that many females that are going to spawn again in the second year. And remember that they only mate once, right? So they have to store all their sperm that first time. So what that means is that if a female were to live 3-4 years, she would probably get sperm limited then, after in her 3rd or 4th year. But because very few of them are there, they have plenty of sperm. So that's why we don't think that at this point males are limiting in the population.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Any more questions from the commission? Mr.
Comment.
Branson?
One of the things that I've learned in talking with crabbers from different watermen associations, and what I've learned from the staff and sitting on the commission, is that when it comes to crabs, we have quite a bit of difference between our crab fisheries. As Mr. Reynolds remarked about sponge crabbing on the eastern shore, the southern bay, as the professor mentioned, in the James River conditions, the upper neck, the northern neck. We have a lot of different variations in our crabbing habits in Virginia. Chief, you agree with that?
I agree. I hope you're not going to ask us to
No.
do spatial management.
No, I'm going to try and neck this down.
I was just thinking the same thing.
And
This is gonna get interesting.
and the regulations that we have from mid-March to the end of November seem to work for all of the crabbers in general. And so I hope that we consider not messing with what we have, and reconsider our decision that we made in June about the dredge fishery and to keep it closed. That's the only comment I have.
I just want to make a comment real quick on that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, we don't end in November. I think didn't the season get voted on for to December 16th?
Season would typically end November 30th. We have extended it 5 years.
This year's extended to 16th.
Right now, it's
Mid-December.
December 20th this year,
Oh, so right now, if the season that was passed was March 17th to December 20th.
till the 20th of this
But
year.
usually is November 30th.
Right.
Typically, yes.
Typically it is, right. So, I just hate for us to make a change that does a couple things. One, it affects a different area of our fishery, and two, perturbates anything that goes into the benchmark stock assessment. If there was a possibility that could happen, I'm not sure, but, you know, while they do these stock assessments, I've learned over the years, talking with Pat and other fishery managers, is that you don't want to change too much while you're doing a stock assessment. You'd rather keep status quo until you finish your research and analysis, then you make fishery decisions after that. But I'm no biologist, so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any more comments, concerns, thoughts, prayers?
I have a question. If we did decide to go with a modification to the crab pot season, which would be close to a month extension, the question was asked, but before next month, would we know if there would have to be any conservation equivalency?
We can find out. Yeah. I would think no, because we haven't had to do that. We extended the season several times, and CBSAC hasn't asked for conservation equivalency. But we were supposed to have a meeting yesterday, and it got canceled, but we'll probably have a meeting next week, and I'll bring that up.
Just comment on that. I think the risk is up to maybe 3% harvest. As you pointed out in 17 in March, it was approximately 2% of the harvest.
2% for the whole month.
For the whole month. So, okay,
Month.
that's 1%, let's just say, if that, in fact,
If it
worked
was
out that
equal,
way.
yeah, if it was equal.
And December, it represents at the most 1%. So you're
Percent.
talking, maybe 1%, give or take a little, to the harvest. And that may not require a conservation equivalency.
Just as an interesting point, if you get a chance, go on our website and listen to the audio from the October 2013 meeting. We're having a lot of the same discussions. I remember hearing that Mr. Erskine said, when we went down this discussion, you said, yes, the same thing, but maybe not right now. So a lot of this is about timing. And so, it may not, we want to try to have a framework in place, but maybe now's not the time to do it, not to open the fishery for crab judging. But, a lot of the same conversations we had back then.
Any more questions? That being said, the matters before the commission. Mr. Erskine.
I'd make a motion to advertise closing or implementing the prohibition on crab dredging for this upcoming season, 2024, 2025, and advertise a extended season through December 31 and an early opening of March 1. Also in that motion, I would include that staff continue working toward a framework or a straw man of what the winter crab dredge fishery would look like. Just adding some context, I guess, to that motion. Or should I wait for if there's a second, sir?
I think he's already said he's going to work on the framework one way or the
Yeah,
other.
we're going to work on that regardless, but if you want it in
No matter
motion,
what comes
that's
at your
fine.
motion, but I got it in there.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
Do you want us to advertise, simply modify the crab pot season, or do you want those dates? Because this will give you a little bit more.
If you tighten it up too tight,
I would say a little more general and just
Okay.
modify the.
As it is up there, advertise, modify.
Modified.
Yeah, okay.
Or
modify the
extend, it
season.
might say extend the crab pot season. Okay,
Okay.
that's good.
My concern around this is certainly there's in the midst of this assessment. And I do understand and appreciate that we should complete that assessment before making some changes to this. I was stunned when Chief Gear said, December 1, this winter dredge fishery would open with no framework around that. I did not understand that it would just open with no management around that. I'm not sure exactly what that means, that anybody with a dredge would go out and start doing something.
I don't think we're
It seems
completely
crazy,
certain, but
I've had this conversation with Kelsey, and I'll say it again. There's three, if the commission decided to do that, there's 2 or 3 other regulations we would have to address, like the license one. So this is not a, wait a minute, you ripped the Band-Aid off and it ran Wild Wild West. There's so many things you have to address if that was to be in consideration.
Understood. I'll end with this. It's very important to have these discussions, and I think CMAC did a great job having them. Thank you for the moderator in that discussion and everybody and all the stakeholders' input. But I would like to see continued discussion opening a possible winter dredge fishery in the future, but now might not be the right time. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. So I have a motion to continue the prohibition on crab dredging for the 2024-25 season and advertise that, and to advertise the modification of a crab pot season, potential modification of a crab pot season. I'd like to add that to it because it's how the board comes out in its motions and votes. So do I and also continue working on the framework for what a crab dredge season looks like in the event one ever opens up. So, did I get that right? Correct. All right, now, I have that motion on the floor. Do I have a second or discussion?
I have a discussion on that.
Ms. Edwards?
Will you bring back the recommendation at the October commission meeting for the extension of the crab pot season?
yes,
Okay.
yes. We will not have the framework, but we will have the extension.
You know, I can give a little bit of clarity on what we're doing here, the advertisement decision. The reason that staff came with the framework that they have is because you have to advertise it a certain way, or you can't go outside of them parameters to make sure that it covers the wishes of the commission. Does that make sense? If you advertise it one way and you put yourself in that rut, there's all you can vote on. So what the staff has done is took CMAC's recommendation and given you the ability to be flexible to a certain extent.
So what AJ's motion is, so I fully understand, is that we're gonna, if we approve this, have a public hearing for closure of the dredge season for 2024-25. And then we will entertain the modification of the crab pot season. Whether that is early, later, that's decided next month.
And tho- and tho-
Or not at all, right.
Those two items are independent of each other.
Right. I'll second that motion.
I got a second to that motion from Mr. Bransom. Any further discussion? Remember, guys, we have to, I know the commission hasn't been used to this, but Mr. Tankard in the room is ironic. He's been used to seeing these advertisement discussions before because we just took that out a few years back. And so every commission meeting, you would have to hear what you were going to hear the next commission meeting. So I know this is the first, but this is really good to do on a situation like this when we brought in ROM and experts from VIMS and a facilitator and got CMAC to really analyze it pretty well and review it. So that being said, are there any further discussion? I'm going to take a show of hands vote so it'll make it easy on me. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. I got Mr. Erskine, Mr. Bransom, Mr. Preston, and Ms. Edwards. 4. All those opposed, raise your hand. 1 opposed, Mr. Headley. Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank Dr. Lipschitz for coming today, providing his insight, and all the CMAC members. I think everybody who spoke was a CMAC member, so it was great that they came here. And I will mention that Christina, who was our facilitator, also facilitated the Menhaden work group that they did. So
She did a good job.
she said the crab one was a little bit more difficult, believe it or not. So, but she did a great job. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And Pat, I've been thanking everybody. I thought, thanking VIMS and CMAC. I would like to take the time to thank you and your staff and Rachel for helping put this together, to Rachel Peabody. You guys did a great job at actually doing a comprehensive review. I know the stock assessment is always important. As you hear what Associate Member Bransom said is absolutely 100% accurate, but it's never a bad thing to look under the hood. especially when you haven't done it in over a decade. So looking under the hood, see what people had to say.
Agreed.
And it was good. You guys did a great job, and I learned a lot in the process. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, on to the next. The new number 8.
Snagging? Snagging, okay. So from blue crabs to snagging of fish. Hopefully this will go pretty quickly. This is a public hearing, proposal to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-740-10 pertaining to snagging or towing of fish to allow the recreational anglers to snag Atlantic menhaden and mullet species in the Mugial genus, white mullet, striped mullet, and flathead gray mullet. And the reason for this is currently it's unlawful to snag any fish. You have to catch them with a hook in the mouth, so to speak. Atlantic menhaden and mullets are used by recreational anglers for bait, cut bait and live bait. Typically, they're caught with cast nets near the shoreline, but if those schools are further offshore, it's putting the shore-based angler at a disadvantage because they can't throw the cast net that far. So by allowing them to use one of these treble hooks, which looks like that, it's a weighted hook, they can just throw it out in the school and they snag the fish and bring it in, they can use it for bait. So that's the premise behind this. So what we're changing this is in section 15 under definitions, we're putting a definition of snagging, which will mean the act of intentionally hooking or attempting to hook a fish in any part of its body other than its mouth using a fishing line, hook, or other device. And the Mugial species means white mullet, striped mullet, and flathead gray mullet. And then in section 20, where snagging is prohibited, all we're doing is adding what species will be allowed. It shall be unlawful for any person to take or attempt to take any finfish by means of snagging other than or except Atlantic menhaden, the species of the Mugial species. So staff's recommendation is the commission approve amendments to Chapter 4 VAC 20-740-10 pertaining to snagging and towing of fish to allow recreational anglers to snag Atlantic menhaden, mullet species, and Mugial species of the white mullet, striped bass, and flathead gray mullet. So it's giving anglers an extra opportunity to get fish for bait that they would, normally might have access to, especially shoreline. Do we have a quorum at this point?
He'll be back. He'll be back.
Okay.
Chief, did this recommendation come from the recreational angling community, or is this something that the Marine Police have seen? And
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, it's like, we've seen that the shore-based anglers, they can't get access to these fish. So I think it's a combination of things.
That makes sense.
Is there any questions for the commission? Thank you, Pat. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this matter? Which is the new item number 8, former number 7, snagging or towing of fish to allow recreational anglers to snag Atlantic menhaden and mullet species. Anyone in the audience wishes to comment on that, please come forward.
Oh, okay. Here's somebody.
You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name for the record, please.
Debbie Campbell, Silver Beach. Could I see the first slide that you put up there, Mr. Guerrero? I'm sorry, I didn't have quite enough time to read it.
That one?
I think it's the next one.
That one.
Yes, there was something about, and other methods. Do you remember? I'm dyslexic, so I'm having a little bit of a struggle
Menhaden,
here.
mullet species, recreational bait. The primary method for recreational anglers to catch menhaden is with a cast net.
All right.
And if it's farther offshore, they can't throw the cast net that far. That's the advantage of using the treble hooks.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the explanation. So, as most of you know, I've been watching the issues with menhaden for a long time, and I would say that at least where I am, there aren't any left to snag. So I would like for you to take that into consideration, and hopefully at another time we'll be discussing and get some relief from the situation we see going on in the Chesapeake. Thank you.
Is there any questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on this matter? Anyone else? All right, that being said, matter is before the commission.
I move to approve staff recommendation.
Got a motion to approve staff recommendation, Mr. Bransom, got a second from Mr. Erskine. Any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed to the motion that's been properly seconded? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Hey, thank you very much.
On to the next.
Okay, got one more item. Okay. These are recommendations from the Recreational Fishing Advisory Board recently. The Recreational Fishing Advisory Board, or the RFAB, advises the Commission on expenditures of the Virginia Saltwater Recreational Fishing Development Fund, or the Saltwater Fund as we call it. The board met virtually on September 9th to vote on recommendations for projects submitted during the funding cycle. There were 19 projects. They recommended funding 18 of them, and the other one, they just want to get some clarification. There were several projects that had requests split funding. Some of the funding comes from the Marine Fishing Improvement Fund, the commercial fund, so that you'll hear from CFAB later on when they approve it, so. But the recreation, just to give you some background on it, it's a board that consists of 9 members. Right now we have 7 because 2 just recently stepped off, and these are the members, and their appointed term. They serve for 3 years at a time, and they can be serve again after that. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but this is the section of code, section 28.2-302.3, in the Code of Virginia, which defines what the Saltwater Recreational Fishing Development Fund is, and the items in yellow define what it can be used for. So the enforcement provisions are dealing primarily with saltwater licenses and fishing from commercial piers. Can be used for recreational fishing opportunities, administering the saltwater fishing sport fish tournament, obtaining data and conducting research and fisheries management, boating access, restoring habitat, and other items for recreational fishermen. So just gives you an idea. And basically what section 28.2-302.4 just describes what the committee does. It's 3-year terms. They're basically geographically, we try to have representation from around the whole state, and what their requirements are, be a member. Typically we have a number of fishing event applications each year. We had 8 this year that we just approved. So these are the 8. You can see it's kind of small print, but it shows the amount in the group. So typically this is one of the things we like. We love spending the money on this because it's usually for youth fishing tournaments, and it's we've lost a couple of long-term tournaments because somebody retired and wasn't going to be doing it anymore. But we're always trying to look, if you know of anybody, any organization wants to do a children's fishing tournament, come see us. We'd be very happy to fund it. Those all 8 of those are RFAB approved. These are all annual projects. There's 4 of them that are ongoing. The Virginia Game Fish Tagging Program, which is Susan Music and Louis Gillingham that do that. The Young of the Year American Eel survey from BIMS as well, which is split between this funding and the Marine Fishing Improvement Fund. The federal assistance for the matching funds for our sport fish restoration, we have to do that as well. Christopher Patrick at VIMS also has a boat scarring effects on submerged aquatic vegetation that he does each year. That's funded both by the Saltwater Fund and also by the Marine Fishing Improvement Fund. That was J.J. Ross' former project. Chris has come here in the past and presented his information as well. And the board approved all these funding for all these programs. There were some new programs that came up, and some of these, the first one is a satellite transmitter tags. They want to tag red drum and determine their release mortality, which is kind of an interesting thing considering we're seeing so many more red drum in the bay. It'd be nice to know what their mortality rates, hooking mortality rates are. There's a genetic study to look at great triggerfish to see if the population we're seeing is the same or different than what's occurring in the South Atlantic. There's a public access waterfront enhancement project in Matthews County through the Matthews Land Conservation. The Phoebus Waterfront, which is just across the Mill Pond over here, they want to do some boat improvements. That was tabled to next meeting because there were some questions. We want to see some modifications to that, so it was tabled to next meeting. And the Virginia Saltwater Tournament Youth Division. We've added a youth division into our citation program. That we wanted just some funds for supplies on that. And all these projects, except for item P, which is the Phoebus Waterfront project, were approved, and we're tabling that one till the next meeting. There was a boating access, the Coles Point Water Access by the Department of Wildlife Resources. They're asking for $500,000. This is a major overhaul of this piece of property, which is going to include a boat ramp, a handicap accessibility. There might be a bait shop as well. This is on the northern neck in Westmoreland County. It will have a boat ramp, 2-hand launch sites in Branson Cove on the Potomac River, and it'll have ADA accessible fishing pier and a gravel parking lot. So I think the total cost of this is $2.2 million, and they asked for $500,000 from us, and that was approved. And then finally, presently, our director for the Virginia Saltwater Fishing Tournament is out on extended leave, and the administrative staff person told us they'd be retiring in 2025. Between the two of them, they have well over 60 years of experience on this program, and the potential loss for this without a succession plan would be devastating to our group. We've been kind of been trying to pick up the slack. The kids citation, which we just approved, we really don't have anybody to implement that right now. So we went to RFAB and requested $83,417 for an acting director just for 1 year. Because when the administrative staff retires, we'd have the initial funding available. So they'd be trained in all administrative duties, and they'd be able to do all the duties of that program and keep it running, not only keep it running, but keep it moving forward. And they approved this as well. So the RFAB, they requested the City of Hampton make some changes to the Phoebus Waterfront project to be reviewed at a later meeting. And the RFAB recommended funding the remaining 18 proposed projects totaling $1,110,556,000 from the Virginia Saltwater Recreational Fishing Development Fund. I'm asking the board if they, it's their pleasure to endorse this and support it.
Any question?
Where does the money come from for the Saltwater Recreational Fishing Development Fund?
Saltwater license funds.
All licenses?
Saltwater grant license.
Okay. Follow-up, not necessarily on that. You said that, like the first A through G, I think it was mostly kids programs. Do y'all have any veterans or disabled veterans programs in that anywhere as far as fishing trips?
From time to time, I don't think it's consistent, but yes, we would be very interested in that. Like a Wounded Warriors program?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I mean, that's,
Similar to that?
that they can apply for funding as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've actually participated, and then Dan Knott at Why Not, he does a lot with that, and we've participated with him before. He has funding sources of the grants. He focuses strictly on Wounded Warrior projects. Also, we participate in the fishing tournament on Tangier, where Officer Pruitt gets involved with the Wounded Warrior projects there. So we do entertain and welcome any veteran programs that can be out there, along with youth.
I have a question, Chief. How much money does recreational fishing licenses contribute to the Recreational Fishing Advisory Board annually? Do you know offhand?
How much do they?
How much do recreational licensing?
I don't know how much it is each year. I know how much was in the budget, how much we had available, and this was about 25%. This amount was about 25%.
That was just a question I had. I don't have an idea. I know there's a lot of saltwater anglers licenses that are sold. I just don't
We also
know.
do our artificial reef program out of this if we're doing deployments. So, if all of a sudden we were going to do if a big ship came available to us, that we can take a chunk of money out of this real quickly.
Does that mean we need a motion to
Need
approve it?
a motion to approve or further discussion or whatever you like.
Motion to approve?
Got a motion to approve staff recommendation, RFAB
And I second it.
from Mr. Headley, got a second from Ms. Edwards. Any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed to this motion that's been properly seconded? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Just to let you know, my wonderful staff was right on us sending me text messages. Annual is about $2.6 million.
Thank you.
And one of the things, too, I'd like to give a shout out to RFAB. They've been doing this a long time. This is not something new, and they have done some amazing programs, and they've done well in some pretty big projects. So they've done good for the recreational anglers of Commonwealth and the environment. I appreciate it. Pat, I think that's it.
I'm done.
So that being said, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. The next commission meeting will be Monday, October 28th, 2024. That is a Monday.